Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast. Joey Van Zummeren, Michael Sams here for Missouri Tigers on SI. Back with our Mizzou football coaching assistant in review. We're going through the defensive coaches and special teams coordinator today. Earlier in the week, we went through the offensive coaches. Fun time just looking at the development and recruiting these coaches have done, and then also the performance of the group in 2024 and just the outlook moving forward. Fun to kind of take a look at these coaches one by one. Again, like we said in that first episode, there's only so much we can tell about development wise, and there obviously it takes a village for recruiting and everything, and there's a lot that plays into that. But we can take a look at kind of just some trends with those groups. So we're going to jump right into this defensive assistant one, starting off with Corey Batoon entering his second year as Missouri's defensive coordinator. 2024, I think they meshed really quickly for having a new defense coordinator, and I think it goes to what Eli Drinkwitz and Corey Batoon talked about of wanting to keep ideas that were familiar to guys for what they had played, and it made sense for entering a year where they had high expectations and were returning a lot of core players to kind of keep those same ideas. And I think Corey Batoon did a really good job of that. And I think, I could see why that might have been viewed as a safer hire. It's not like there was a lot of other big names going around, but he's coming from South Alabama. He's not necessarily a hotshot new coach on the rise, and he's running the same scheme. But I think it was the right call for Eli Drinkwitz to go for this type of guy at defensive coordinator. Any thoughts on that, Michael? And I mean, it's too early to tell on recruiting overall, but any thoughts on the job Corey did in year one?
Yeah, in general, don't know much about him as a recruiter. So like you said, we're going to have to kind of see how that goes, but no complaints so far in the transfer portal and bringing in talent. Again, wide variety of positions, kind of the same thing that we talked about last episode with Kirby Moore. Just like bringing in a variety of talented players that bring different things to the table at like across the board, across all positions, secondary, defensive front, linebackers. I think there's no shortage of talent anywhere. So that's a good thing. I was really impressed with how quick they meshed. It seemed like it only took them 2 or 3 games, and there was very rarely, major lapses at all. Like there never, not a lot of big plays allowed. In the pass game and the run game was always solid, and there was such a the variety of pass rushers on that team last year was so impressive, and they all did different things, which again is something I always find impressive and look for. So again, no complaints. This team meshed really, really well. I think he's a good recruiter. Again, we can't really tell, but this transfer portal cycle, they reloaded very, very well, and I would not expect much drop off going into next season.
Right. The one thing I could say about Corey Batoon as a recruiter and just his teaching style is there is at least with how he talks, a real emphasis on adapting the system to players and keeping what they're comfortable with. And I think, ideally you would be able to have some grand, big, complex scheme that's unable to be figured out by offenses. But overall, I mean, especially with the transfer portal, you gotta go with what works best with the talent you have. And then next up at safeties coach Jacob Yoro, he coached with Corey Batoon at Hawaii for a few years, and then Batoon brought him on board with Missouri. Again, too early to tell. Overall, at safety though, I mean they're in really good position. Last year they had Marvin Burks, Joseph Charleston, and Dalen Carnell there, but overall the main part of those guys' development happened before him. I would say you point to Trajan Greco, though, to come in as a freshman and get playing time pretty early on. Can give credit to him there. Recruiting-wise, they did really well in the transfer portal this year with Jalen Catalon, Santana Banner, and Most Phillips. So overall, though, I mean, especially with Banner and Phillips, I would say are the biggest ones to look at. Is there any? I know you talked to Santana Banner when he committed. Did he have anything to say about Yoro or Batum, Michael?
It was mainly Corey Batoon, a little bit of Europe, but it was the same thing. Just good relationship building. Really did a good job with like not only recruiting his family, and that's not a foreign concept at all. But said all the right things. And I think the scheme and adaptability was a big thing that he mentioned, kind of going hand in hand with Corey Batoon a little bit. Just being able to play a wide variety of roles and doing whatever they needed him to do and kind of adapt the systems. I think Santana Banner might be the biggest tell of development over the next couple seasons, or however long Jacob Euro and Santana Banner are here. I think that's going to be the biggest tell development because he's still fairly young. But Trajan Jekko is going to be a big player. Obviously, CJ Bass will be a fun watch to see how he comes along. 2026, the safety position as far as official visits go, there's a couple guys, but no major high profile names. But at some point, not just with Jacob Euro, but in general, you have to kind of establish a level of trust with this coaching staff and assume that they know what they're doing. And even if it's not the biggest most high profile name, they see things in a player. So that's kind of the assumption I'm taking with the guys. It looks like Jacob Euro is zeroing in on at the safety position. I think Tony Forney is a 3-star recruit that should be an interesting one, but nothing crazy yet. Like Durham Cato, it's a little early to tell, but there should be some interesting developmental cases with Greco and Banner and CJ Bass this season. He doesn't really have to worry about Jalen Catalon because he's been around the block a time or two, but it'll be interesting to see how those guys come along.
And then next up, Al Pogue at defensive backs. First off, Al Pogue has some great content on his Twitter. He had a great post this past spring, posting a picture of like this hoodie and sweatpants that he wore to practice every day. And he said he was retiring the outfit, and that outfit you could tell had been around the block like Jalen Catalon. And like, I had never noticed it being out there at practice all the time, but when he posted, I was like, that's right. He did. I've never seen Al Pogue not wearing that hoodie and sweatpants combo. So he's got that going for him. I'm curious to see what his new go-to outfit is, or if he's looking to have some more variation. But overall, with this group in 2024, they could have had a little bit more depth. Because once they got past Marcus Clark, it's a little bit concerning, but they really have to go past Marcus Clark. To have Nicholas Deloach come along like the way he did in 2024 and expect to be in 2025 was big. I would say Toriano Pride maybe not fully delivering to what people expected out of the transfer portal, but he still got another year here. He was still young this past season. Recruiting wise, I'll talk on development first. I think you got to mention this: Rakestraw and Chris Simmons-Drain in this group. Two guys that came in. Chris Simmons-Drain as a wide receiver. Two guys that came in, I think both 3-star prospects and then developed into really good starters in the SEC and NFL draft picks. Recruiting wise, what do you have to say there, Michael?
Yeah, quickly on the development front, and I'll mention him in the recruiting aspect too. I think Cam Keys is kind of the biggest, at least recently, kind of the biggest pull. I think there was a lot of the coaching staff had a lot of positive things to say about Cam Keys last season. I don't remember if he burned his red shirt or not. I don't believe he did. He did not burn his red shirt, so he's going to be a redshirt freshman this season. He might have got a little bit of run on special teams, but I think that's going to be a guy that maybe gets worked in to, into the rotation. They haven't really been afraid to mix and match those guys. I think we still need to see a little bit more from Nick Deloach and Toriano Pride. Like you said, Deloach definitely took steps, but those two were far from perfect. And then on the recruiting front, it's nothing crazy with the high profile big names. Honestly, Cam Keys recently, it was probably the biggest biggest name of them. Jaron Sensabaugh was a 24 commit who transferred to NC State, I believe. So, again, the big names aren't there necessarily, but there's a couple good ones in this 26 class. One of those guys was Caden Harris. He committed to Vanderbilt and is from the Nashville area, so that's not necessarily a shock, but he's still slated to take an official visit to Missouri, so maybe that's one that they can, pull him away from Vanderbilt. But I think Stephen Hall will be another interesting transfer portal transfer portal focus, but he really hasn't had to go crazy with the portal or high school recruiting. I mean, outside of, the Abrams Drain and Rakestraw, those guys, but he's had so many cornerstones that are willing to stay, in that room for a long time and develop that getting flashy new players hasn't really been a big emphasis. So I think development wise, he's probably one of the better ones on this coaching staff because he can get guys to stay so long, and he's trying out NFL players as well, which people are probably going to not complain about.
Yeah, I would say development as well with Drayden Norwood. I mean, he's really solid cornerback this past year after not playing that much before then. Next up at linebackers, Derek Nicholson replacing DJ Smith. With Nicholson, just wanted to do a quick review of what he accomplished at Miami the past 2 seasons. He was their co-defense coordinator as well. As soon as he was hired by Missouri, a lot of people said, great recruiter, development wasn't there. So we'll see how that turns out. He recruited 4 stars, 2 4-star prospects in this most recent class. It's hard to really make the case for him developing Francisco Maragoa, who was an NFL draft pick, but because he was a pretty highly rated transfer out of Washington State. But I know you talked to Francisco about Derek at the combine, Michael. What did he have to say there?
Yeah, I really stumbled into that one. That was a lot of fun. But it was mainly leadership and relationship based. Francisco just told me that Derek is an incredible leader, an incredible person, and was kind of more than just a coaching figure in that sort of sense. I don't think Francisco needed much coaching. He like we kind of already touched on. He was a pretty incredible player, but yeah, I mean they only spent a season or 2 together, but it was just a lot of gratefulness and respect towards Derek Nicholson. For the time they spent together, just from a leadership aspect. I think recruiting wise, you hit the nail on the head with him being a good recruiter, and we're going to see how good of a recruiter he is here over the summer with 4-star linebacker Jordan Campbell. I believe he recruited Jordan Campbell to Miami and committed to Miami while Derek Nicholson was still there or around the same time frame, maybe a little bit after. But regardless, Derek Nicholson was the biggest proponent in getting Jordan Campbell to Miami. Obviously, he made the switch, and now it came out, I think it was on Tuesday, May 20th, that Jordan Campbell's taking an official visit to Missouri. So that would be a very, very big recruiting pull if they can flip him over to Missouri. He's taking visits to Miami, then Auburn and Nebraska as well. So it's not a done deal by any means, but there's definitely interest there. I think Derek Nicholson is really going to have to flex his muscles and use his connection with Jordan Campbell to get him there. But we're going to see how good of a recruiter he is with Jordan Campbell. I'm really excited to see how it goes. Jordan Campbell is an impressive player. There's a lot of, film and tape all over the place to watch on him. So that'll be a fun one, but he's done a good job recruiting so far. Obviously, he's going to have plenty to work with this coming season too. So we'll see how he is as a coach and developer in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say Josiah Trotter is definitely got to watch there as far as the development he can take him on, kind of similar to what you mentioned with Jacob Yoro and Santana Banner. And then moving things over to edge rusher with Brian Early, had some big shoes to fill with Kevin Peoples, who won the Broyles Award for Best Assistant Coach in 2023. And so Brian Early, I mean, first off, what I would say about him is just, for those who do not know, because I think this is important to know about just what kind of coach he is. He did adopt Dre Greenlaw, who is one of his former players. Dre Greenlaw had a rough home situation, I believe. So Brian and his wife took him in and still have a great relationship with Dre Greenlaw today after Greenlaw was a former player under Early. And then also one thing that really sticks out to me is that whenever an edge rusher transfers from Missouri, enters the transfer portal, Brian Early is immediately on there sharing their highlights, saying you got to get this guy, which I think says a lot. I'm sure there's a lot, even if they are not posting on Twitter. There's a lot of coaches that are bitter when a guy transfers away from them. And I think Brian Early understands a lot of times that it is bigger than him. There's a lot more going on with it, and wants to help those guys out. So obviously it takes more to coaching than just being a nice guy, but he certainly has that going for him and is really focused on establishing those individual connections, which is obviously crucial to recruiting. Maybe unfortunately not as much as it was before, but still a big part of it no matter what. And with that, I mean, they've recruited edge rushers so well over this past year in the transfer portal and then freshman class. What can you say about that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, last episode on the offensive side, I hesitated to give Jacob Peeler and Brandon Jones the top recruiter award. Maybe we can give it to these three. Brian Early's been incredible. whether it was in the transfer portal with the four guys he brought in, three guys, whatever, that he brought in this offseason, or the two guys that he has in this class. I think Javion Hilson might actually be the most impressive of the bunch when it comes to recruiting victories. I mean, obviously Damon Wilson, it was kind of out of nowhere, but Javion Hilson was really out of nowhere. I mean, Missouri offered, and just like that, it was a really quick process and a quick commitment. I mean, he was a top 100 recruit in the country, so that's not don't want to underplay that at all. I think he's going to be an incredible player, but obviously brings in Damon Wilson, Landon Kitchen, and Nate Johnson, three guys in which you would imagine are going to be very, very big contributors. I think there is going to be another development watch for Zion Young. I'm really high on Zion Young. I think he's a great player. I think he could take a massive jump this season and even be one of the best edge rushers in the SEC and really help his NFL draft stock. But that's just me blowing smoke. Obviously, he has to do it, and there needs to be the development side of things. So that'll be a good tell there. But there's never been a lack of depth at the edge rusher position, and I think Eli Drinkwitz and Batoon and then Brian Early now have always kind of prided themselves on having depth there and being able to mix and match and counter skill sets, one power guy, one speed guy, or mixing and matching, whatever that means and whatever that looks like. That's going to be the case again this year. And I think that the talent reload is really impressive. I'm so excited to watch this position group. I think it's definitely the deepest, maybe the best on the team, especially with some of the guys coming back. We'll hopefully get to see Darius Smith get some run this season. I really hope so, because I think a lot of people are excited to watch him. There's Langdon Kitchen as well. I don't even know if I mentioned him. Dayton Hopkins is another freshman. So much talent. It's going to be a blast to watch these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just so many for every player on there. I think obviously as a group, like you said, are really talented as a whole, but a lot to follow and be excited about with a lot of these individual players. Obviously, Damon Wilson, very highly rated recruit, both out of high school and then entering the transfer portal, now entering his first year as an actual starter, presumably. Can he live up to that? With Zion Young, like you said, I'm very high on Zion Young and what he can do. I think we could look a little to that as far as Brian Early's development skills for what Zion Young did this past season as a 3-star transfer rated. So again, very high potential for Zion Young, I think. And he only had 2.5 sacks last season, which is weird to me. Felt like he had such more of an impact. And then with all the young players, another storyline being Nate Johnson and, having a really great freshman season at App State and then dropping down sophomore year. What does that look like his junior year? So a lot to watch with each of these individual players, and Brian Early certainly playing a hand in all that. Finally, to round us out, Eric Link, special teams coordinator, formerly the tight ends coach before they were able to, as we mentioned, have Durham Cato not only be an assistant, but actually coach guys on the field. With Eric Link, it's difficult to say. I mean, tight end wise, he recruited Brett Norfleet, recruited Jude James. At special teams, though, there is definitely some valid questions for how they performed over this past season. They had 2 fake punts. I asked Eli Drinkwitz that they allowed 2 fake punts that they allowed. I asked Eli Drinkwitz about allowing both of those after the Oklahoma game, I believe, or maybe it was UMass when they first allowed it. I think it was Oklahoma. And Eli Drinkwitz, I couldn't even finish my question, not because he was being rude, but because he was very frustrated about their special teams performance on the season. And in that game, yeah, well, I believe it was Oklahoma, ton of penalties on special teams as well. Returner wise, it's not like it's been anything special. They had Luther Burden fumble it, but I mean, at the end of the day, fumble it against Auburn. But at the end of the day, how much can you blame the special teams coordinator for that? I'm not sure. So Eli Drinkwitz said when I asked him about it that special teams was not good enough as of late. So I think, I really can't say too much as far as recruiting development for Eric Link on special teams or at tight end. But at the very least, last year wasn't good enough, and we'll see what the product is this year. Anything there, Michael?
Nothing really. I mean, I think Blake Craig will probably be an interesting case of development. Obviously, he was inconsistent, but he's young. So I think you have a young and inexperienced. So I feel like it's kind of hard to throw, point fingers or throw blame at Eric Link for a freshman kicker. So I don't want to do that, but that's there. I mean, there's new faces on the special teams. I mean, Connor Wesselman's going to be the punter. I don't think we know much about Connor Wesselman. So, well, I mean, there's going to be new faces, I guess. I don't know if there's going to be any competition as far as those two positions go, but I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint. You hope they clean up those mistakes and the penalties. Yeah, I don't really have much to say outside of that.
Well, that's going to round us out on our assistant coaches review. This was fun again to take a more microscopic look at each of these position groups, see what they're doing recruiting development wise. But overall, for the most part, again, there's only so much we can tell on the outside with what's going on. This group is losing DJ Smith and Al Davis. For as far as DJ Smith accepting the defense coordinator job at App State, I feel like we've talked about it so much recently with basketball, but always a good thing for your guys, your assistant coaches to be taking promoted positions. And then Al Davis, well, like we mentioned last episode, an unfortunate loss there with how deep these defensive tackle rooms have been over the past 2 seasons. And Al Davis did less with more of not necessarily like really top rated guys, but he did recruit pretty well, especially out of the transfer portal. So that's going to round us out. Any final thoughts, Michael?
I mean, with the defensive tackle position, I think now was maybe not the best time for as far as development goes for there to be a coaching change there because I think there are probably that's probably at the top of the list for questions about a position, right? And you look at the offensive line and there's questions there, but Brandon Jones is reliable. So David Blackwell, I believe, is assuming some responsibility for the defensive tackles. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Obviously, Chris McClellan is old, reliable, and had a heck of a season last year. So you would kind of anticipate the same thing's going to happen this season. But outside of that, it gets a little murkier. Sterling Webb, I believe, will be the next guy up, and then you have a long list of names that I think we've been talking about a lot since the end of the season. As far as this guy needs to step up or that guy needs to step up, whether it's Marquise Graciel, Sam Williams, Jalen Marshall. They added Braylon Henderson from Ohio in the transfer portal. That's a lot of guys that are going to have to assume some responsibility. And we've been kind of saying this, especially with Jalen Marshall and Marquise Graciel, that now is the time for them to step up. So I guess we will see if the time with Al Davis, the development there has paid off, because it's a position where it is deep, but some of those guys aren't necessarily the most proven yet. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. All the best to Al Davis, though. He, cited family reasons and personal issues for resigning. So all the best to Al Davis.
Absolutely. I mean, looking at David Blackwell, deep resume, and again, was one of those guys that was a assistant slash analyst for them in 2023, and then with the rule change was able to actually coach. So he coached defensive tackles. Al Davis coached defensive line. I'm not sure what the difference is when they have a edge coach as well, but helped with that group. Obviously knows all those guys. Coaching veteran. He's been coaching since '92. Varied background as well. Coached inside linebackers at Clemson at one point. Was defense coordinator at Fordham, where Vince Lombardi played like 100 years before. But David Blackwell certainly has the resume to take over this position group as well. Maybe not what he was expecting when he was joining Missouri as an analyst, but here he is now. So that's going to round us out for this episode today. We'll have plenty of content for you all season long as well. And we hope you tune into that over at Missouri Tigers on SI.